Everything is recorded, of course. I will also send everybody next time the link to my YouTube channel. You can find it there because I made these 7 meetings public. So anybody can see it if they would like. If you have a problem with that, I can unlist them. So you can tell me. That's also okay. I want to start with Ramchal because there's always more to say. I wrote a whole book just on the redemption according to the Vilna Gaon, but there's an art of making things abridged and short, and it's not a simple thing. My father used to always say it takes 5 minutes to prepare for a lecture of 1 hour and 1 hour to prepare for a lecture of 5 minutes, because you have to think exactly what you're going to put in the shortened version. So a few things I want to mention about Ramchal. Ramchal is one of the first that I can think of who actually talked about redemption in a structured theory. He's also one of the first who tried to explain the concept of Mashiach ben Yosef as being a pkidah, as being a first step in the line of the Messianic period. I'll give you an example. Mashiach ben Yosef is mentioned in the Talmud in Masechet Sukkah in the 4th chapter. And when the Talmud mentions it, they mention it once. They say that on the pasuk, I think in Zechariah, Vayabitu et asher dakaru, they looked down to see who it was who was slain. So the Talmud says, Ze Mashiach ben Yosef. That is referring to the Messiah of the house of Joseph, who will be killed by Armilus Harasha, Armilus the wicked. Now, so the Talmud doesn't tell us who this person is. All they tell us he's going to die. So what about the rest of the story? What happens before? And why do you call him Mashiach ben Yosef? That's it. That's all the Talmud says about this story. Mashiach ben Yosef is called in the Yalkut Shimoni and the Midrashim in a few places Mashiach ben Ephraim, which of course Ephraim was the largest of the tribes, of the northern tribes, and was of course the chosen son of Joseph, who Yaakov said that this would be the greater son of the two, even though he was not the Bechor. So you do have Mashiach ben Ephraim in the Midrashim, and of course the Zohar has multiple sources that talk about Mashiach ben Yosef, and in multiple places the Zohar, contradicting the Talmud, claims that Mashiach ben Yosef will almost die, but won't die in the end. So, because Moshe Rabbeinu, which is interesting, comes after him, Moshe Rabbeinu davened on his behalf that he should not die. This is in the symbolism of the Zohar. And then, of course, it's mentioned many times also in Tikkunei Zohar, which is part of the Zoharic literature. Okay, but let me go back to Ramchal. Just to summarize some of the ideas of Ramchal, and I think somebody asked me a question last time. I was connected to this, but I don't remember what the question was. But if somebody remembers, I said that for Ramchal, the idea of the 6,000 years are connected to the 6 days of creation. You had a perfect world, which was day one. In the understanding of Ramchal, who sees these midrashim that talk about day one as being this perfect light as a symbol of a perfect world. So the perfect God creates a perfect world. But human beings cannot live in a perfect world, so the world now has to be imperfect. And that's what happens on day 2 with the rakia, the firmament between the waters, the imperfect world. The imperfect world is nobody's fault. It's the human condition. Human beings need to perfect themselves. They need to do something. The need for accomplishment is very basic to our nature. So obviously we were created this way. Just like the need to survive and to continue to a next generation is basic to our instinct, the feeling of accomplishment is basic to our instinct as a human being. So, Yagia kapecha kitochel, ashrecha v'tovlach, it says in Tehillim, if you can eat from what you reap, you will be happy. and it'll be good for you. So accomplishment is very, even though Reb Nachman is very negative about accomplishment and it's all dimion, imagination, whatever, but it is natural to the human being. And David HaMelech has no qualms with the idea of accomplishment, as long as we accomplish good things and not too many bad ones. So, so for Ramchal, the second step, of course, is Adam and Eve in the garden. I mentioned this last time, on day 6, where again, they are the kernel of existence. Whatever they do at that kernel of existence, they can now either rectify the world and perfect it, or they can push it down another peg. Now, of course, God knows that what they're going to do. They're going to eat from the tree because that's, again, human nature. It's called curiosity. And it's part of the plan. But again, because the plan is not good for Adam and Eve, they had to make the choice. It's not right for God to put them in a situation which is not favorable towards them. So he as if gave them the possibility. They chose, now deal with it. But God knows, according to Ramchal, God knows in advance that that's what's going to happen. So sort of like God said, okay, I knew this was going to happen. Not a problem. You're now in the new world. The new world is called Eitz Hadat Tov Hara, a world in which you can feel both good and evil within your consciousness. So it's going to be now a struggle, but you can deal with this. Just like God says to Cain, Ve'elecha chukato, that sin is sitting at the door and it wants you, but you can overcome it. You have that ability if you choose to have that ability. So it depends really what you choose. You know, there's a story about a fellow goes to the Rebbe, Hasidic Rebbe. And, you know, in Chassidut, one of the big issues is what they call foreign thoughts. You know, a person wants to pray and all these foreign thoughts come to their mind. Well, how are they going to deal with it? And in general in life, how do you control your thoughts? You can control your actions, but how do you control your thoughts? So he goes to the Rebbe's house, knocks on the door, says, Rebbe, I have a problem. Nobody answers. Says, Rebbe, I have a problem. I have foreign thoughts. I need help. Nobody answers. Waits a little bit more. Again, bangs on the door. He says, Rebbe, I know you're here. Just answer me. What am I supposed to do for foreign thoughts? Okay, hangs around. Nobody answers. 10 minutes later, the Rebbe opens up the window from the second floor, says, this is just to teach you that the household owner opens the door only to somebody who wants to open the door. So yeah, thoughts come into your mind, but how long do you entertain it? That's already up to you. So you can always throw them out the back door. Okay, but the point is that even though we live in let's say a balance, according to the Zohar, life is a balance, where we have to keep the good and the bad in the balance and then decide which way we want to go, which hopefully for the good. We never eradicate evil, not even from our own selves, but we can purify ourselves so that evil becomes further and further from our consciousness. It becomes less of a struggle. But everybody on their own level, you know, if somebody who is very ethical, they're not thinking every day, should I steal, should I not steal? It's not a question anymore. Maybe certain people, but once you get to a certain level, that's not the daily question. You know, but everybody has their struggle on their level. You know, there's another Hasidic story. Maybe I told this here, I can't remember. A fellow comes over to his Rebbe, who's very, very sick. He says, Rebbe, what's going on? He says, Rebbe says, look, I feel awful. I don't know how long I have. He says, can I ask a question? He says, what's the question? He says, Rebbe, in such a situation when you really don't know how long you have, is there still an evil inclination? Okay, most people would think that's chutzpah. Rebbe says, the answer is yes. He says, yes. What is that evil inclination telling you at this point? What could you possibly do? You're talking about the evil inclination saying to me that one moment before my soul departs, I should scream out Shema Yisrael, and everybody will say, what a saintly person that was. Everybody has their own struggles on their level, depending on who they are as human beings. Now, the difference between Maimonides and Ramchal. Oh, let me just continue. This is a very important point, Ramchal. Ramchal, at the beginning, follows the rabbinic thinking of the 6,000 years. The 6,000 years means, of course, that by the end of the 6th millennia, you're supposed to enter 2 phases, Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David. Ramchal actually does not go into great detail what happens in those phases. When we get to the Vilna Gaon, he will. It's just, he calls it a Pkida, which is the lower phase, and then the later phase, which is Mashiach ben David, is the full redemption. There's partial and there is full. There's transient and there's permanent. Just like in the Bible, things that have to do with Joseph are transient, things that have to do with Judah are permanent. Right? The transient king was from Benjamin, the brother, also a son of Rachel. His name was Saul, and the actual king is Judah. The transient house of worship was the Mishkan, which sat in the tribe of Joseph in Shiloh, and the permanent one was in Jerusalem, the Beit HaMikdash. The transient kingdom was the northern kingdom of Israel, which split off during the time of the son of Solomon, Jeroboam, and eventually only Judah continued after the destruction of the first of the first temple. And then the transient Mashiach is called Mashiach ben Yosef, who has accomplished certain things to set the groundwork for Mashiach ben David. But Ramchal does not go into too much detail. However, Ramchal does create an unusual concept, which is very, very different than Maimonides. You see, for Maimonides, as I explained it at the time, it's basically the normal world. It's a world with world peace. The Jews come back to the land. There's no more anti-Semitism because we're now a strong country. We're respected among the nations. We're doing the right things. Righteous leadership. Hopefully that'll happen one day. And, we get our act together. And then the nations look at us and they say, this is, we regain respect on the world Bama. And then people are also interested. There's a certain mystique about the Jewish people. So you can use this for the good or for the bad. It's been used in the past for the bad because of anti-Semitism, but it can be used for the good because we do have what to teach about the relationship between man and God and about morality and is about spirituality. And that really is our main commodity we're supposed to be teaching. The fact that Jews have to be good at other things too, that's because people can be good at other things, especially since we learn survival. When you learn survival, so you get good at certain things that help you survive. Shalom Miriam. So for Rambam, I said, the world never ends. Ve'aretz le'olam omedet, it says in Ecclesiastes and Kohelet. And he takes this very seriously. Rambam believes the world was created. That's our belief. But there's no reason to argue that it'll ever stop. Okay, according to modern science, I think it's like 1 million or 2 million years until we hit the sun because the sun keeps getting smaller and smaller. Okay, Rambam didn't think about that problem. But I'm just saying in general, I wouldn't worry about it. I think we have other problems here before that 1 million years comes. Yes, 5 billion years. Okay, you have a little more time. About a little more time, right? So I wouldn't lose sleep over it tonight. We'll have plenty of time to work out that later. Maybe we'll move everybody to a different solar system. We might discover Jews on other planets. Anything's possible. So but for Rambam, it's like a normal universe. And I explained that it's sort of like we're in prehistory. For Ramchal, it's very different. Also for Rambam, the main goal is the world to come, the individual goal. The whole issue of the Messianic era, this is both a world issue and a Jewish issue, just to solve the problems. Once you solve the problems and the world is normal, people can live good lives, and then after death, after life, they go into Olam Haba, and they've earned a better position there. That's Rambam. Ramchal sees it very differently. I want to quote something. Ramchal sees it very differently. He says something like this in Dat Funat. He says there's going to be a very gradual evolution of man. He doesn't use the word evolution, but that's obvious what he means. For Ramchal, who never heard of the theory of evolution of the 19th century, but for Ramchal, the evolution of man means this. First, what is the Messianic period? How could it happen, Ramchal says? After all, there are always good people, there are always bad people. There's always what we call in Hebrew mazan ema. It's sort of like a vicious balance, let's say, between the good and the bad. Sometimes the good win, sometimes the bad win. Hopefully, most of the time, the good wins so that we can overcome animosity. But that seems to be the way the world works. There seems to be a problem to every solution. So then how is there going to be a Messianic period? One thing Ramchal says is God pushes from behind the curtains and enables certain things that people didn't think about. We don't think of all the possibilities. Even our computers can't think of all the possibilities, but they do a better job than us. But the problem is we have to program them. So if we didn't have to program them, maybe they would come up with even better solutions. So, but for Ramchal, number one, God helps behind the curtains. Number two, he believes that human beings will change. During the Messianic era, which is a natural era for Ramchal, but during the time of Mashiach ben David, something unnatural will happen in man, will actually be morally developed. Now, we know lots of people like that. I'm sure all of us do. Probably some of you already are like that. But I mean, there are a lot of people who are very morally developed that for them, the issues are not the regular issues of human beings. They're worried more about these sensitive issues about, the story of Rabbi Aryeh Levine was walking with Rabbi Kook, Abraham Isaac Kook. And while they're walking, Rabbi Levine pulled off just a branch from a twig from a tree. Rabbi Kook looked at him in shock. He said, you took off a branch from a tree that's a living being for no reason. Okay, so some people are very developed in their sensitivities on a certain level, which other people, that's for Ramchal, then, that's what's going to be with humanity. Evil won't be eradicated, but in general, human beings, if we have a balance between the good and evil inclination at this point, the good inclination will start getting stronger. It'll be the stronger of the two inclinations. That will be the next step in the development of mankind. And then Ramchal does something very unusual. He claims that the development will continue. He says it will continue for 10,000 years. Now, this is interesting. Chazal talk about 6,000 years in the seventh millennia as being a change. But where does the 10,000 years come from? 10,000 years comes from a book that was written in the 13th century called Brit Menucha. Brit Menucha was an anonymously written Kabbalistic book. Obviously not anonymous, but we just don't know who it was. And Chaim Vital in the 16th century praises this book, saying that the person, whoever wrote it, had Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. And he considers it one of the important Kabbalistic works of the Middle Ages. And Brit Menucha brings a tradition of 10,000 years of history, which is very different than the Talmudic tradition. And Ramchal accepts this. Ramchal claims, okay, it sounds a little fantastic, but I'll explain the way I understand. Even after the sixth millennia, even when we enter the Messianic age, things are not over. They keep developing. Getting past evil is step one for the human being. There are levels that we have to reach to bring us back to the sixth day of creation. We have to get there. We have to develop ourselves spiritually. The New Age people say that the next step of human evolution is telepathy. So, that's what they claim. I've heard things like that before. Okay, maybe it's telepathy, maybe it's prophecy. I don't know. But the idea is that the mind, right, is the new frontier, much more than Star Trek, right? The real frontier is the frontiers of the mind for a human being, because this is who we are, and we barely understand it. Freud claimed we barely know, what was it, 10%? Barely use 10% of the brain, something like that. So this frontier is going to change us. The more we understand it and the more we go in the direction of spiritual betterment. So it goes from ethical betterment to spiritual betterment, and this keeps continuing. Now I'm going to quote you Ramchal, the fantastic part, without quoting it from the book. Ramchal says somewhere during these 10 millennia, when we hit 7, 8, or whatever, the more human beings develop, the more the soul will be stronger than the body. Ramchal claims that on that 6th day of creation in Gan Eden, Adam and Eve had a body, but the soul was so strong that it overcame the body. The body seemed like light. It seemed more like energy than actual physicality. Of course, we know that all physicality comes from energy, but at that level, the world looked like energy. It didn't look like materialism. And according to Ramchal, the more we develop as human beings, the more it's going to bring us back to this, call it spiritual level, for the lack of being able to describe it any other way, where our soul energetic level will become stronger than the body. At some point in our development, I'm just continuing with the way he explains it. Again, he doesn't say when. He just keeps saying it's going to get stronger and stronger, 7th millennia, 8th millennia, all the way to the 10th. At some point, he says, it'll get so strong that we will be able to perceive the souls who have died and are still with us. Because Gan Eden is not there, it's here, just in a different dimension. And as soon as human beings, meaning all of mankind that is still in existence at that point, will reach this level, we'll be able to open up our eyes and see beyond physicality. And he says that is called Tchiyat HaMeitim. It's not that people come back from death. It's that we realize they never actually died. Now, this sounds very fantastic, especially if you live in the 20th century. But I think after the second half of the 20th century, the ideas of Ramchal are much closer to the theories of evolution, which of course are material theories and biological theories. But you could argue, I don't know if people make that argument, that who says evolution is supposed to stop? I don't know. I'm sure Jonathan will have something to say about that. He's well read in the sciences. But let me read you something of Rav Kook. The Rav Kook says he doesn't mention Ramchal by name, but it's obvious that he is referring to him. This is Orot HaKodesh, volume 2, page 537. It's in Ivrit. I'll translate it. He says, the theory of evolution, Torat HaItpatchut, Ha'olechet v'koveshet et ha'olam, which is conquering the world today, meaning conquering the world philosophically, in the sciences. Hi matima l'razeh olam shel HaKabbalah. It is more in tune to the secrets of the Kabbalah more than any other philosophical theory. He's obviously referring to Ramchal, in my opinion. So, who's Ramchal in his thinking is creating an evolutionary theory of the body and the soul. This idea of evolution, which goes in a line of ascent, gives the most basic optimism that we could ask for. Because how can you give up when you see that everything is developing and progressing? And when you go into the basics of this idea of development and progression, we find the divine element in its clearest absolute presence. That specifically Ein Sof before that the infinity in actuality is what is developing and bringing into actuality what is infinity in theory. Basically, Rav Kook actually was very pro-evolution. He thought it was a fantastic discovery. It's true that in his letter to Moshe Zeidel, in the letters, he says, look, there are different theories that come, they go, whatever. But in Orot HaKodesh, it's obvious that he was very, very optimistic about this idea. And he writes in another place in Shmona Kvatzim, what's called the 8 books, the 8 corpuses. He actually says that it's better to teach the people that the world was created from nothing than to teach the Kabbalistic ideas, only because people would never understand. You have to teach them things that they'll get. But the truth is, he says that the Kabbalistic ideas are much closer to the theory of evolution and then the idea of philosophical idea of creation ex nihilo. He says you have to explain people things according to their ability to cope with it. You can't make great ideological changes in their theology. You have to. Okay, that's what I want to say about Ramchal. So I said, even though Ramchal sounds much more fantastic than Rambam, who really makes things seem probable, maybe a little impossible, maybe a little improbable, but not impossible, right? But Ramchal has this whole new idea, but you never know. Our ideas based on the new science is changing so much about how we see the human being in the world. Maybe he will turn out to be closer to the truth in the end than we actually suspected. Okay, now I'd like to go to Rav Kook. Question, Sheilot? Does it say? Okay.
I just want to say that I'm discovering that there is a science fiction author, Dan Simmons, who is Jewish, was clearly influenced by Ramchal. I didn't know this. I'm just discovering.
Who was?
Dan Simmons, science fiction author. He's clearly was influenced by Ramchal, by Rabbi Luzzatto. I just found that out from what you said.
Ramchal influenced both the Mitnagdim and the Hasidim. Yeah, he had a very big influence. This young man who died at the age of 38 or 40. So yes, he had really a major influence. Okay, I want to run out of time, so let me go to our next. Okay, the Vilna Gaon. The interesting thing about the Vilna Gaon, the Vilna Gaon didn't really write books. His ideas are basically commentaries. So it really takes a long time to pick the flowers from the commentaries and put them together in a bouquet. You really have to try to understand, a lot of his ideas that have to do with the redemption Messianism are on his commentary to the Zoharic literature of Tikkunei Zohar. Tikkunei Zohar is 70 chapters of commentary on the word Bereshit. It gives 70 meanings to the word Bereshit. That's just the way the structure is. And in each one they talk about different things, but there's a lot of Messianism within Tikkunei Zohar. And so a lot of the Gra's ideas actually come out in his commentary, Tikkunei Zohar. Sometimes you could ask the question, is this his idea or is he just explaining Tikkunei Zohar? But he goes into such detail that obviously he was involved in these ideas because he's not just explaining Tikkunei Zohar. He's going to great, great detail. Okay, so let me just go through a few things because there's really a lot here and I'm going to try to make it concise as possible in the last half hour that we have here. First of all, I want to go just a few things I have here. Galut. I read to you last time the vision of Ezekiel, the valley of the dry bones, right? Where the dry bones are the Jews in Babylonia, who for the first time in Jewish history are in exile. Because remember, we weren't a people yet when we went down to Egypt. We were just tribes. We were a small tribe, 70 people. But when we came out of Egypt, we were a people. So Babylonia was the first time we experienced exile and the loss of our sovereignty. So people were shaken up. They weren't really sure what's supposed to happen. Even though Jeremiah promised them it's only 70 years, it was a big shakeup. And in the end, most of the Jews remained in Babylonia. They might have come later as the Second Commonwealth pulled itself together, but at the beginning, they did not. The Vilna Gaon has a very interesting commentary on his commentary to the Zohar about the dry bones of Yechezkel, of Ezekiel. It says, Ezekiel spoke in riddles since he was outside of Israel, meaning in Babylonia, and it was already the end of the First Temple period. And Zechariah, who was also in the Babylonian exile, had all these cryptic visions. And there is no one among us to understand them, these visions, which are very cryptic, both in Zechariah and Ezekiel chapter 1, until a spirit will be poured over us from above. For since the destruction of the temple, our spirit is gone, the crown of our heads. We remain like a body without a soul. And the expulsion from the land of Israel to Chutz La'aretz was like the grave. Meaning we had a body, but then we were expelled from the land. The soul was the temple, meaning the divine presence. The body was the fact that we still had a national body in the land of Israel. Once we were kicked out of the land of Israel, it was like being in a grave. The maggots are surrounding us, and we are not able to save ourselves from the nations who are eating our flesh. However, I skipped a little bit here. There used to be groups of study and large yeshivot, which were the ones who kept up the body. He sees the scholars as the ones that kept the body together, until the flesh started to decay, and the bones were scattered time and time again. But the bones were still there, which represent the Torah. For the Torah scholars in Israel who supported the body, until even the bones decayed. And all that remains of us became a decayed dirt. Our souls are bent down to the dirt, as it says in Eicha. And now we are hoping for the resurrection of these bones. As it says, shake off your dirt and arise. Hitnari mi'afarkumi, as in Isaiah. And the Spirit will be poured upon us again from above. So you can see that for Rav Kook, exile is definitely not the final goal. And Rav Kook, Vilna Gaon. It has a lot of interesting things. Just a few other things here. Vilna Gaon tried to make Aliyah. According to R.E. Morgenstern, it was in 1778. There's some questions when it was, 1778, 1781. He wrote a letter on the way, according to Morgenstern, from Amsterdam. It says, and I am going, thank God, to the Holy Land, which we're all hoping to see, the cherished of Israel, the cherished of God, may he be blessed. All the upper and lower worlds covet this place, and I am going in peace, Baruch Hashem. Then he says to his wife, I'll bring you later, so don't worry. Right. It also says there's a mitzvah to live in the land of Israel. All the it's on the Ramban. I'm going to skip that. Just wanted you to know that this is an also interesting thing. Chaim Volozhin, who actually helped sponsor the Aliyah of the Vilna Gaon students in 1806, meaning he helped raise the money, not that he was independently wealthy. So there is a literature, I wrote a book about it called the Rav Chaim Volozhin's discussions with students of the yeshiva. It's this literature that was found by students of the Volozhin Yeshiva in the last 3 to 4 years of the existence of the yeshiva, and we have it written in various corpuses. I put it together in a book, and one of the sayings there, which we have in the handwriting of both of Elazar Landau, which was a direct descendant of the Vilna Gaon, but also of Yosef Zundel of Salant, who made Aliyah in 1827, was a close student of Chaim Volozhin. So one of the things he says, in the name of Chaim Volozhin, he says, I've heard from our rabbi, Chaim Volozhin, in the verse where it says in Amos, she fell, she meaning the daughter of Israel, she fell and will not rise, O maiden of Israel. The Talmud explains in Brachot, she fell, and will not fall again, rise, O maiden of Israel. Meaning the Talmud, they used to try to make it sound more positive. What does this mean? For she is still falling, meaning the daughter of Israel is still falling, until she will reach the lowest level. She cannot fall anymore. And now has come the time has already arrived. Say, arise, O maiden of Israel. Already in the time of Chaim Volozhin, they really felt that they are very close to some turning point in history. But let's go back to the Gra's ideas. I mentioned last time that the Talmud in Sanhedrin claims that there were stops on the way where the Messiah could have happened. As Rav says, there were set times, but all the set times have now passed. And now the final redemption is based on teshuvah and good deeds. And Samuel says, why are you saying this? Let a mourner sit in his mourning. Don't add suffering to it. Don't make it sound like it'll never happen. The Vilna Gaon, who follows the Tikkunei Zohar, claims, rereads this Talmudic source, like the Zohar sometimes does, and says, yes, there were set times. There are set times in every generation, according to the merit of that generation. As it says in Tehillim, today, to his voice you hearken, meaning the Messiah can come even today if the Jews are worthy. But the set time is not contingent on tshuva. It's a mistake. It's contingent on God's kindness. As it says in Isaiah, Lemani eseh, for my sake do I do this. And it says in our tefillah, Mevi goel livnei vneihem leman shmo be'ava, he brings a redeemer for their children's children for the sake of his name in love. It's not contingent on teshuvah. This is what the Zohar says, this is what the Vilna Gaon follows in his commentary. I said this, this also I read last time, Isaac Chaver Waldman. I'm sure I said this. Now, here's another interesting one. Sanhedrin says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, it says in Isaiah 66, Bi'ita chishena, I am God, in its time I will hasten it. In its time, it says, but it also says, I will hasten it. This means that if the people of Israel are meritorious, I will hasten it. If not, in its time. Rabbi Yochanan said, the son of David will come only in a generation which is either totally meritorious, which means it'll come earlier, or in a generation which is totally guilty, it'll come in its time. Kulo zakai, kulo chayav. Listen to it. This is another quote from the Grand Tikkunei Zohar. And he's saying this when Tikkunei Zohar quotes the Talmud of a generation which is totally guilty, meaning totally void of merit. So the Gra says, and it says, the son of David will not come unless it's a generation which is totally meritorious or totally guilty of sin. And then the Gra adds, and for sure the second option. In other words, I'm looking around. The first option doesn't seem that plausible, so it looks like it'll be the second option. And then he has a quote, as it says in the Zohar, which there's actually a pasuk, I think, in Zechariah. And he looked around to see who was still there with him, and did not find among them any deeds or merits. So, so the Gra says, if you're asking me, there's no two options anymore. There's only one option. It'll be in a generation which is not perfect. That's just the way it goes. Another Gra again on the Zohar. For all that time, all of Israel will be empty of everything. Not one of them will be a scholar of Torah or prophecy. Only Moses and the two Mashiachim, the two Messiahs, Ben Joseph and David, will be the ones with Torah. They will defend Jerusalem. And the Mashiachim will also have prophecy, and they will defend Israel. The rest of them. Okay, there's a lot of interesting sources here. I'll just run through it a little bit. Menachem Mendel of Shklov was a very close disciple of Vilna Gaon, just like Chaim Volozhin. He was the first to make Aliyah to Israel in 1806, and originally settled in Sfat. Then from Sfat, after the earthquake, just before the earthquake, he actually settled in Jerusalem after they had a plague in the Galil. He writes, and Israel will be forgiven for their sins. For those who remain did not actually sin. But their sins are not like the other nations, since they repent immediately. So really, the Jews don't have sins, because we do things bad sometimes, but we don't mean it. So we actually regret. They regret and they confess their actions, and they bring upon themselves grief. More than what the Holy One, blessed be He, is actually decreed. We have a tendency to guilt ourselves out, and we do that. Even the attribute of justice will defend Israel, meaning not just out of God's mercy. It will be revealed that all was for the good and all was for Israel. And definitely Philo-Semite. Another, the Vilna Gaon on Sefer Tzniuta, which is a small part of the Zohar. From this previous discussion, you can understand that the time of redemption will be in its set time, not earlier. Heaven forbid, meaning halavai, but when they, Israel, will not be meritorious. And this is the final set time. And I ask the reader, swear by God, Lord of Israel, not to reveal this. He says more here. He says, please see Zohar on Bamidbar, certain place, and compare it to Sanhedrin, and then you'll get an idea. Just keep going. The Vilna Gaon on Tikkunei Zohar Chadash, which is another part of the Zohar of Tikkunei Zohar. It says, the right hand draws near. It says, with great mercy I shall ungather you. Kabbalistic literature, the right hand is the hand of mercy, or the hand of kindness. The left hand is called the hand of judgment. And the Talmud says you should always have a small doche v'yamin mekarevet. And it's talking about education of children. You push them with the left hand, but you bring them close with the right hand. Meaning, don't be too tough with them. If you push them away only with the left hand, bring them closer with the right hand. So the Zohar says this is the way it works in the redemption. The right hand draws near, because it says, with great mercy I shall ungather you. They, Israel, will leave the galut with the right side, meaning the power of the right hand. Mercy. In the beginning, there will be arousal of the left hand. As it says in Shir Hashirim, the Song of Songs, Smolo tachat roshi, yamino techabkeni. His left hand is behind my head. With his right hand, he will embrace me. What does it mean, his left hand is behind my head? This is the time of the Pekidah. This is a word, by the way, which is taken from Ramchal, but also from the Zohar. Pekidah means this will be the first sign of the Messianic age. It's called the Pekidah, when God remembers. Just like it happened under Cyrus. king of Persia. When God put it into Cyrus, where he made the statement, any Jew wants, they can go back to the land of Israel. He was the first Persian king. However, they will not leave the Galut completely. It won't be the complete redemption. Only afterwards, the right side will be aroused, which is called compassion. But before the redemption, God creates worlds and destroys them. He's also talking about something totally different. The Vilna Gaon follows the Zohar's symbolic language, and he says things. Another quote by the Vilna Gaon. At the end of days, when you reach the footsteps of the Messiah, again, footsteps of Messiah, what does that mean? It's like somebody's walking in the snow or in the sand. You don't see them, but you see their footsteps. So you know you're getting close when you're following them. In the end of days, in the footsteps of the Messiah, there's going to be a lot of chutzpah. People would be really audacious and brazen. Now is the chaos. He says it's already starting. He died in 1797. And now is the chaos. Already there. Okay, let me try to explain just in a nutshell the Vilna Gaon's ideas. And then if your Hebrew is up to it, you want a volume of my book on the Vilna Gaon's ideas. Hopefully one day it'll be translated maybe into English and into French. But the meantime is in the Ivrit. According to the Vilna Gaon, let me put just a page here, give you an idea. I'm gonna draw this a little bit just to give you an idea how it works. You know what? I'll put it right here. We already have this page in front of us. A lot of sources, but we're going to run out of time, and I just want you to get a basic idea. Stages. There are stages in Mashiach ben Yosef. Most of the Vilna Gaon's discussion, by the way, is the first part of the Messianic age, which is called Mashiach ben Yosef. By the way, there's a book called Kol HaTor, a book that created a lot of controversy, both in the traditional world, the religious world, and among academics. The book appears to be things that were written by the Rivlin family already in the middle of the 19th century. Remember, the Rivlins were part of the Vilna Gaon family. Binyamin Rivlin, who was a student of the Vilna Gaon, was the probably the beginning of the Rivlin family. He was the first Rivlin. His name was Rivlis. He was probably named after a woman whose name was Rivka. So it became Rivka, Riva, Rivlis, and then Rivlin. And his son, Hillel Rivlin of Shklov, Binyamin actually tried to make Aliyah. He died on the way. His son made Aliyah later, around 1837, something like that, and lived in Jerusalem. But from the family, there were quite a few scholars, like Yosef Rivlin, who was one of the founders of Petach Tikva, and also Nachalat Shiva here in Jerusalem, and was very active in the old Yishuv. So one of these people, or maybe a few of them, started interpreting ideas of the Vilna Gaon to make them updated towards what they were seeing in their own lives in the 19th century. But some of the ideas are very interesting. Does their enhancement of his ideas come from him or not? Maybe not, but it's still interesting. Okay? For instance, they have an interesting idea about Mashiach ben Yosef. Remember, Mashiach ben Yosef represents, according to Vilna Gaon, the first stage of the Messianic period. It's, if you want, it's called the natural stage, where nothing changes in the world, but the Jews are able to pull themselves out of the diaspora. There are basically 5 things that have to happen. One is a partial ingathering of the exiles. I explain this in the book where it comes from. Gathering of exiles. All this is taken from and pieces of the Gra's writings. A partial ingathering of the exiles. The total ingathering is only in the second period. Teaching the secrets of Torah, meaning Kabbalah, will be very prominent. The building of Jerusalem, which is a big a motif also in Kol HaTor. Wars over Israel. Remember, there's a midrash the Rashi brings, says, after Joseph was born, Jacob said, it's time to leave Laban's house. So Rashi brings a midrash. Why does it say after Joseph was born? It says because Joseph is Sitno Shel Esav, which means the enemy of Esau, the one who's going to the adversary of Esau, who's going to overcome Esau. So Mashiach ben Yosef is the one who's able to overcome Esau. In Midrashic thinking, Esau, by the way, is all the descendants of the Roman Empire, which is interesting. The connection is not clear, but definitely they see Esau as the descendants of the Roman Empire. So wars over Israel. So an interesting thing you have in Kol HaTor, when it talks, it also, as I said, there's going to be chutzpah, because it says that in the Mishnah. Brazenness. It says, Bikvot Mishicha chutzpah yazge. That's the Mishnah Sota, chapter 9. Chutzpah. Remember the early pioneers, social pioneers who came to Israel, a lot of them threw off the shackles of religiosity. And for their parents, it says, it's a Mishnah in Sota. B'ikvot Mishicha chutzpah yazge. In the footsteps of the Messiah, there'll be great brazenness. Ben kam ba'aviv ubat bi'ima. A son will turn against his father and a daughter against her mother. There was a major generation gap between at that time, a break with tradition, a break with the Zionists, at least use it positively for the land of Israel. There was also a major secular wave among the Jews between the wars, between the First and Second War, and even before. From the beginning of the 20th century. Zionism was only one of the manifestations of that. Rav Kook talks a lot about this. So in Kol HaTor, they quote about Joseph. If you remember when Joseph meets his brothers after 21 years or 20 years, it says that Joseph recognized them, but they did not recognize Joseph. So according to Kol HaTor, Joseph, the Mashiach of the son of Joseph, comes at a time when they're Jews which are unrecognizable. I mean, they don't look like they're doing anything Jewish. That's called Mashiach ben Yosef. And they're the ones who are actually pushing things forward. In early Zionism, a lot of the rabbis didn't understand people like Rabbi Kook. Why are you embracing these people? They don't care about your Shabbat. They don't care about your Pesach, about your Tefillin. Rav Kook says, God has a lot of emissaries. So I don't question those things. I just see it happening. So anyhow, so when I remember offhand, I'd have to look in the book. Definitely the idea of the partial ingathering of the exiles, secrets of the Torah, the building of Jerusalem, the wars over Israel, chutzpah, all these things within, and of course also the mitzvot that have to do with the land. Truma, Maaser, Shemitah, the land of Israel, which are reinstated. So all this is the first phase. And the first phase is a natural phase. You could argue we're going through it already. I think that those who walked in the path of Vilna Gaon's writings already at the end of the 19th century felt that way. Definitely now that we have a state, there's a lot to be grateful for. Unfortunately, we take things for for granted, which is not good. We waste our time fighting between each other instead of trying to progress and, bridging gaps and whatever. So anyhow, so this is his idea. Now, the truth is, and Rav Kook, I keep saying Rav Kook. Rav Kook, by the way, is a direct follower of the Vilna Gaon on these issues. Let me read you something from Rav Kook. You want we ran out of time. According to the Vilna Gaon, it's like this. There are two stages. The early stage is Mashiach ben Yosef. The later stage is called Mashiach ben David. By the way, in Kol HaTorah, they have a very interesting interpretation. And they claim that Mashiach ben Yosef is not a person. It's a period of time. This I did not find in the Vilna Gaon's own writings. It's very interesting. I don't know if they had this as a tradition or was their interpretation. It is a very plausible interpretation. Vilna Gaon's, at least the Zohar itself, seems to imply there are many people who are called Mashiach ben Yosef, meaning people who are instilled with this need to push things forward. Interestingly enough, Rabbi Kook, when Hershel died in 1904, 1905, and he went to give the hesped, to eulogize there at the funeral, the whole funeral was not, the whole hesped, his whole eulogy had nothing to do with Hershel. It was all about the passage where the Talmud talks about the death of the Messiah of the house of Joseph. His whole eulogy. In other words, he saw people like Hershel as people who were instilled with this desire to push the Jewish people forward. Obviously, they were touched by the soul of the Messiah of the house of Joseph. Whether they knew it or not, unimportant, irrelevant to the issue. And there are other people like that. Kol HaTorah sees it as a period where everybody who tries to do these things gets help from above. Anybody who tries to further these causes gets help from above. The later stage, which is called the House of David, which is much later, not clear exactly when, is already when the temple will be built, and there'll be already the full ingathering of the exiles and world peace, etc., which for the Vilna Gaon is a miracle. That's the miraculous part. World peace is a miracle. Bringing all the Jews to Israel is a miracle. Building the temple and it actually happening is a miracle. Remember, we can't build the temple unless we actually create peace in the Middle East. So hopefully those both will happen together. And it'll benefit all of the nations and all the creeds, not just us. Ki beiti beit tefillah yikareh l'chol ha'amim, it says. Yeah. But anyhow, so there's not a lot of discussion of what's going to happen during the time of Mashiach ben David. They're just general ideas. By the way, even the writings of the Ari, Isaac Luria, there's no discussion what's going to happen with Mashiach ben David. Only at the early stages is at the most. And as I said, what the Vilna Gaon has to say is much more than it says in the writings of Isaac Luria of the 16th century about this particular issue. Okay, so this is it basically in a nutshell. There's a lot to say. Maybe I'll quote you one last thing, which is a quote from Rabbi Kook, which is actually a direct quote from the Vilna Gaon, even though he doesn't say where he gets it from. So let me see if I can find it quickly. And if so, I'll show it to you. Should be over. Got it? No. Just it. No. No. Hold it. A little bit of time to find these things sometimes. Oop. No. Okay, here it is. This is a quote from Rav Kook, but it's actually a direct interpretation of a quote from the Vilna Gaon, as I show in my book. Here it is. In the first, can you see this? No, I don't think you can. Hold on. Didn't do share. Share screen. The first generation of the footsteps of Messiah, which is called Mashiach ben Yosef, in the beginning of the revealed end of the settlement of the land of Israel. For Rav Kook, based on the Gemara in Sanhedrin 97, Rabbi Abba says you have no better sign that this is the time is coming when you see the land of Israel giving its fruit in abundance. Because it says in Isaiah, and you, the trees of Israel, shoot forth your branches and bear your fruit because it's going to happen very soon. Ki kervu lavo. So Rabbi Abba says this is the best sign of Ketz HaMeguleh, which is the revealed end. So in the beginning of the revealed end of the settlement of the land of Israel, it prepares the physicality of the assembly of Israel. At that point, the spiritual side is subordinate and just protects the inner life. However, when the physical aspect of the nation shall strengthen and all its inner holy qualities, and all its inner holy qualities shall be revealed, and the Torah and its light shall return with its vigor to be a beacon of light for the whole world, a crown of glory in the hand of God, and a royal robe in the palm of the God of Israel, which is a quote from Isaiah. There's another thing actually Rav Kook says, not here, in his Arpalei Tohar. He writes in his Arpalei Tohar, says, we have a tradition, he doesn't say from whom, but it's a tradition from the Vilna Gaon. Says we have a tradition that after the first stage of the land of Israel is strengthened, things are going to go backwards. And only after that will it go forwards. This, by the way, is taken directly from the Vilna Gaon on his commentary on Tikkunei Zohar. If you want, I can show it to you. Oh, if I can find it quickly. This is such a great book, Arpalei Tohar has a lot of interesting stuff in it. It was funny that at the beginning, Tzvi Yehuda Kook didn't want them to publish it for some reason. Eventually they did. This one I just said, and then the second one. Sorry, I'm going a few minutes over. Just as one of the great excerpts from Rav Kook. If I can find it. And he talks a lot about the chutzpah of this first generation. Chutzpah. Okay, one moment. Prepared it. I'm very sorry. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it. Here. Sometimes somebody quotes it. Orot HaTchiyah. Oh, here it is. Also an Orot HaTchiyah. Perfect. Okay, I'm going to read this to you. I'll translate it as I read it, and this will be the last source for today. Can't see it yet. You'll see it in a moment. We have a tradition, Mukubalimanu. There's going to be Merida Ruchanit, which means a spiritual rebellion in the land of Israel and in Israel. At that first episode of the national renaissance, when the national renaissance will aroused. The physical abundance which will come to part of our nation who will think that they've already reached their goal, because people will see that in the state of Israel, things are okay, economy's stable, we're going forward, or what they call it, what they call it again? So, that book again that the guy wrote about Israel? I'm thinking about I have all this high-tech stuff, technological. And people think things are okay, we're doing okay. And at that point, there's going to be a turn against spirituality, because this is going to lessen the soul. Because there will be times when people say, lose hope and spirit because it seems like we've already reached the ideal. All the great strivings for lofty ideals and sanctified ideals is going to finish. Spirit will start to dwindle until there'll be confusion and a tempest and almost a mahapecha, which means, of course, revolution almost. Then people will understand that the true strength of the Jewish people is in the Holy of Holies, in God and His Torah. And there will be a desire for the light of spirituality, which is the real strength which overcomes all the powers in the world. Need for this miridah, this need for this rebellion, it's because we're going to build up the material aspect of the nation. And it has to happen that way. After all, there were so many years that we didn't have it, nefsu, that became nil. All our national strength during the exile was nullified. We had no possibility of working in materialism. So when the materialism comes back, it will come back with thunder and lightning. It will create tempests. This is called Chevlei Mashiach, the birth pains of Messiah, which in the end will bring fragrance to the world through their pain. That's Rav Kook. Meaning this is going to happen. Will be a difficult time. It will bring fragrance. And it will, just like going through childbirth, seems like the end, but it does bring something new, and that something new brings back hope. And that hope all of a sudden creates a new world. So, yeah. Of course, Rav Kook is writing in a time where everybody likes revolutions. It's the beginning of the 20th century. So he's writing like a revolutionary. But even if you tame it down a little bit, he's basically saying there's going to be a time when people will think, what was the whole point if the whole point of the state was for the Jewish people to have a shelter, they have a shelter. What's the next step? Then they'll realize that the next step is that Zionism is not over. It only just started. When they understand that, then they'll realize that it's what you do in this state. Remember, after Parshat Yitro, when we're given the Torah or the Decalogue, the next thing is Mishpatim, how to set up a just state. Right? The fun just starts. It's not over at that time. We have a state, but to do it correctly, that takes a long time. And when that happens, then it's the spiritual aspects that you want people to reach. So it just started. Toda rabah, everybody. I hope this was helpful. It might have been a little confusing too, but I hope it was helpful. The plan, I think you're on mute, Philippe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the plan at this point is, after this point, I was thinking maybe doing 1 or 2 meetings on Megillat Esther, because we are coming towards Purim.
Yes.
We can do that. And then I thought of doing another sidra of about 7 meetings on Rav Kook's ideas about Zionism in the state of Israel. which really develops from his thinking about teshuvah, which is interesting enough. I remember when I first met people from Merkaz Harav Yeshiva, this guy said, explain to me Rabbi Kook's teaching. He says, we start with Orot HaTeshuvah, the lights of penitence. I'm saying, yeah, but I want to get to the good stuff after that. But it took me a while to realize that it's all connected to the way in his thinking.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. And thank you really for coming up with this idea of getting people together.
Thank you so much.
And it
Thank
will
you.
grow. Shalom, shalom.
Amen.
Tודה רבה. Edith, you're okay? Oh, you're gone. Oh, we turn this off.